This is Status Update, the creator-led podcast that you can listen to at work, because it is a work podcast. I'm Stevie Johnson, MD of influencer marketing agency Disrupt.
And I'm Jake Crabb, the marketing manager at that very same influencer marketing agency, Disrupt. And I'm also the voice of Gen Z. Now, last week in the studio, we had in as our guest Amelia Sordell.
If you curate the feed that you want to see and that inspires you, you would never have this issue of like logging on and feeling like I'm not good enough.
The question that we want to answer in today's podcast is whether personal branding is just a fad or it's something that's super vital for people in the workforce today. So let's go get Amelia from the green room and see if we can answer that for you. We're back in the room for Status Update. Really excited for what we've got coming up over the next few weeks. How are you, Jake?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad to be back in the room. I'm glad to be back on the sofa, man.
We've got some pretty exciting plans for Status Update after the initial success, I think we'll call it.
Yep, absolutely.
A lot of cool guests coming our way, including today.
Yep.
We've got Amelia Sordell, who's going to be touching base on all things personal branding, which is super exciting. But before we get into some of that, how are Gen Z feeling about 2024?
2024 is kind of being viewed as a fresh perspective for a lot of people. For myself especially, I'm positive and optimistic feelings about this year.
Yeah.
I've said to a lot of people this year, I'm dedicating this year to the pursuit of happiness. Not everyone can be happy all the time. Obviously, you're kind of being human if you did. But I think this year, I'm trying to make small changes to my life that...
So what are those goals for 2020? I don't want to talk about resolutions because, whatever. I'm more of a, let's set goals for the year.
Yeah, okay. I think...
So what are some of your personal ones?
Well, I'm currently on a bit of a sobriety journey. Read more.
Yeah, love that.
I've never really been
one of mine.
Yeah, I've never really been a big reader, but I've read almost 3 books so far this year, which is, if you know me personally, it's an achievement.
That's awesome. 3 so far.
Yeah.
In terms of for mindset and anxiety, I've always felt reading as being a really good antidote to that. I'm the same. I've set myself a goal of 10 books this year.
I think you'll smash that.
I think I should be able to. I did set myself 25 books a few years ago, and I had done 12 through 6 months and then fell off a cliff a little bit. So that should be good. Just the standard exercise more. A couple of personal, family-based ones.
Yeah.
So got a little one at home.
Yep.
Trying to set up our next stage for our future and what that looks like, which we don't have to get into too much right now. But, I think new year, fresh start. I think, you'll be the same as me. Super excited as to what is happening with Disrupt this year.
Absolutely.
Our goals for growth as an agency and what we plan to achieve there, which is awesome. And of course, bringing the listener into the studio with us for Status Update. Now, before Amelia comes in, we're going to speak a little bit about personal branding.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on personal branding?
What
do you know about it?
Not loads. Probably not as much as I should as a marketing manager. Yeah. I think personal branding's had a big rise over the last several years. You jump on... Well, I mean, any social media really is a personal brand, isn't it? Like, you have a social media account, that's your personal brand. Especially since I've been more active on LinkedIn over the last couple of years, that's really picked up and people are really kind of trying to make a name for themselves in their niche on LinkedIn. In terms of how to successfully execute a personal brand or build a personal brand, I'm probably not the best person to ask. I haven't got huge
that's why
followings.
Amelia's coming in.
Well, exactly. You've got the experience.
Got a new personal brand right now.
What's that? Oh,
I'm trying to be younger and cooler.
Yeah, for anyone who's listening, Stevie Johnson is currently drinking out of a Stanley Cup, a highly sought after Stanley Cup. Listen, if you want to become the voice of Gen Z and swap roles with me, that's fine, mate.
Look, the way I see it is, I can't.
Can I ask, was that a personal purchase or was it a present?
It was a present.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel when you unwrapped it? Were you excited?
I wasn't too sure about it, to be honest. I definitely did not think I needed one, but now I'm using one.
Yeah.
And Stanley Cup do not sponsor this podcast just yet. I've really, really enjoyed it. But also the way I look at it is I can't be MD of an influencer and social media agency and not be on it with trends and the cool kids and so on.
Of course.
So,
speaking of Stanley, did you see the clip on social media that went viral? A woman, I think in the US, her car set fire. The next day, they went and visited the wreckage of the car, and her Stanley Cup was still in there with ice in it.
Yeah.
And I think Stanley ended up buying her a new car and sending her a load.
They did. And that is just, and I love how we've come onto this because it ties into kind of what we do.
Yeah, of course.
Disrupt and everything else. But that is UGC at its finest.
Oh, yeah. 2 ads I saw last year that stuck with me and really impressed me with that and Norwich City Football Club's mental health campaign.
Yeah, a really good one. I mean, so much good stuff happening. But yeah, UGC is going to be on a lot of people's trends lists for this year. If you guys haven't seen what happened with that lady with the Stanley Cup in America,
check it out.
Check it out. And that, UGC at its finest. On other people's lists for 2024 trends is going to be personal branding. So I feel like this is a good time now to get Amelia onto the couch.
Let's do it.
And start talking about that and her. Welcome, Amelia. Thanks for joining us on Status Update.
Hello.
Before we tuck in to the topics that we want to do, tuck in.
Let's get tucked in, mate. Yeah.
Icebreaker that we ask all of our guests when they come on is if they can think back to a status update that they made on social media when they first started using it, that they now look back on and cringe.
I cringe at all my status updates, if I'm perfectly honest. I am 100% okay with the consequences of being myself. So I don't know if I'm like would go back and delete anything, but I was very much the leader and the cheerleader of the Frape Society back in the day.
Okay.
And I don't know if I would cringe at some of the things that I put on my channels, but I've definitely cringed at some of the things that I put on other people's. Mainly my brother.
Right, okay.
So yeah.
That was a savage time,
I
wasn't
forgot
it?
about
It
the
was
Frape.
great. It was before the world decided that everything was unacceptable and we were all going to cry about everything.
Yeah.
A good Frape was like iconic, and that would stay in the school yard for a solid week, and you were just a legend.
Yeah, I remember it at university, like when you'd leave your room, and it was always awful when someone had access, and because you were making so many new friends as well.
Yeah.
Like after a night out, you'd have 10, 15 friend requests.
After the mandatory photo dump, when you got tagged in every photo, you have to go through manually untag yourself from all the nonsense.
Or trying to remember the people who have added you as a friend the next morning, and be like, I have no recollection of that person.
Who's Sarah?
Oh my gosh, so good. I like that though. The Frape, I've forgotten about.
But it was always obvious when someone got Fraped. It would be like, I like snogging goats or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
That's why the subtle Frape was so important.
Oh,
If you could make it out like that's the kind of thing someone might say.
Yeah. Had to be realistic.
Yeah.
So my dad got me once. I can't remember
dad?
what it was. Yeah. Mate. That's the
savage.
household I grew up
That's
in.
a legend.
But Amelia, one of the reasons we were so excited to have you on is to talk about something that you are an expert in, which is all around personal branding. Now, it's now more than just a hot topic. It's something that I'm sure there are tons of trend reports for 2024 that people are mentioning it. So really keen to kind of just get your thoughts on it as a whole. But ultimately, for the listener that might not know what personal branding is, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think personal branding as a concept is very hot at the minute right now. I think it was accelerated a lot during COVID because everyone was at home, and like, how do you reach people when you're at home and you can't go out and network, right? The easiest way was to do it online. And so I think the concept of personal branding became more and more interesting and mainstream during kind of 2020, 2021. And, luckily that's when I started my business. So I just happened to have the timing spot on. But what is personal branding? It's not a big shiny object, which is what I think most people think it is. They think it's some kind of like artificial, overly polished, overly produced version of who you are. And I think the reason people think that's because it's brand, like it's like personal brand. And people think that a brand is like this thing that you create. But actually a personal brand is not something you create, it's something you control. You guys already have personal brands. I have a personal brand. People walking in downstairs in the coffee shop, we all have personal brands. The concept of personal branding is simply using a strategy to shape your reputation, which is what a personal brand is. It's like, what are people saying about me when I'm not in the room, and how can I influence that kind of thought process, is what I would say.
I think that's a really great way of putting
Reputation at scale.
Reputation at scale. I love that. One of the things that I find with personal branding, and I like to think I've got a personal brand already, I'm sure it could be better. But I imagine for a lot of people, they think, all right, I'm not necessarily an authority in my space right now, so I don't need a personal brand, or I shouldn't have one. Or is it the opposite? A personal brand will elevate that authority that you can have in the space, if that makes sense.
A lot of people think that, right? Like, I had this conversation. In fact, we met at the Influencer Marketing Show, and I made this point on stage. I've got a very good friend who has become a good friend because she's a mentee. I'm mentoring her. She's, 21-year-old running a business. And she said exactly the same thing. She said, I'm not an expert yet.
Yeah.
Like I can't build my brand because I'm not an expert. I can't be an authority in my space because I have no authority. And I said, that's absolute bullshit.
Right.
You are a person going on a journey and you clearly have some kind of expertise because you wouldn't be running this business if you didn't. You wouldn't have people paying you to do it. So you have something about you. You need to take people on that journey. And I think it goes back to what I was saying a minute ago about personal brand not being this like object that you create. It's who you are. And I don't know everything about personal branding. There are far more intelligent people in my industry. There's far more innovative people in my industry. There's far more creative people in my industry. But I'm just more vocal about it. And I'm more willing, before we started recording, I said I'm 100% okay with like consequences of who I am.
Yeah.
And that is what makes me probably one of the top couple, if not 2 or 3 in the UK, certainly in this arena, because I'm okay with saying I don't know everything, but I'm willing to put myself out there and say that. And that's what makes people buy into me and trust me. Therefore, I get the results from the personal branding because they go, even though she's not maybe, the best person in the world at this, she's really authentic. And therefore, I'd trust her with my brand more than I would trust someone else's. And that impact is the same regardless of what, you're selling, whether it be like Tala, Grace Beverly, great example. Her stuff is arguably almost identical to Adenola, right? Does anyone know who the guy that runs Adenola is? I do because I've researched it, and it's a dude, by the way, and it's a like, not that I have anything wrong. I love men, like not like that, but brother, son, father, etc. No problem with men, but it's a women's wear brand, right?
Yeah.
And so as a woman, I would love to have seen like, oh, it's like this amazing woman that started this because, she had a problem with VPL or something like that. But no, it's a guy who heard his girlfriend complaining or his friends complaining about women's wear and then created a solution for it.
Okay.
Tala, which is run by Grace Beverly, made £1 million in sales off one item when they launched it because people love Grace Beverly.
Yeah.
It's not because Tala is some unique, different, me as the example, better than product or service. It's because they love her. And people buy from me. Like I have a platform that's called Get Klowt, and it's a personal branding platform that basically helps you build your personal brand. There are plenty of other options for other people to spend the same amount of money, probably getting a potentially like more in-depth product, but they want to be part of my platform because they love me.
Because
They want to be
ultimately
part of my community, and that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah, and you are the living example of it, right?
Yeah.
We're connected on LinkedIn, and I see a lot of your content going out there, very strong, obviously, in the personal branding space, but you're preaching what you're selling ultimately, right? And I think
I am
that's
the product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And where individuals might come unstuck, at Disrupt, we do influence marketing and social. We make brands famous. Why don't we do that for ourselves as individuals? We're very good at doing it for other brands.
By the way, every marketing agency has that problem.
Yeah.
I don't know any marketing agencies that market themselves
Yeah.
well. It's like that whole thing of like, why do accountants go bankrupt?
Yeah.
Like, because
Exactly.
they don't spend any of their expertise on themselves. They spend it only on their clients. So they might manage their clients' finances really well, but then they neglect their own. It's that old, age thing. There's so many examples of
It
that.
is, yeah. And it's something that we definitely looked at. I mean, Jake, you've been with us, 18 months now?
Yeah. As the marketing manager, I'll take that on board.
But no, look, you got to think, you're a service-based business,
Yeah.
right? You're a marketing agency. You're a professional services company.
Yeah.
You're selling influencer marketing. How, and I don't mean this as a combative way, but just more of like and I had this conversation with Harry Hugo, which is why it's on the top of my mind. What makes you think that a brand's going to spend money with you to make them famous if you can't even do that for yourself?
Yeah.
It's
Very
kind of
true.
like this, like you would never trust someone to, you would never trust someone with your money who'd gone bankrupt. You would never trust a chef with your food, like cooking you food, if what they ate was like noodles.
That's very true.
Like you need to show, not tell, how good you are. And it's not just
Yeah.
with the example of other clients. It's like, actually, we're so good. Not only can we do this with other clients, but we can do it for ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And hence why successful podcast, other
Yeah,
cool
I
content
mean,
that
I
we're
heard
doing.
top 3. I think that's
Top
pretty
5 in the
fucking
marketing
cool.
charts on Apple. I don't think we've announced that to our listener, actually.
I don't think we
There you go.
have.
Now
There
is
you
the
go.
time,
Now
guys.
you-
Top
yeah,
3.
tell-
Leave a review and subscribe.
Tell all your friends.
Thank you. Yeah. No, thank you.
Exactly.
Tell your friends.
But it's just, I just want to harken back to the point on personal branding though, because I said at the top before you came in, Amelia, that I don't really know much about personal branding, so I was excited to sit down and talk with you today. But my initial thought would be that you had to be an expert in your space in order to kind of say that you've got a personal brand in say in marketing or say, you know, in whatever. I know from my experience when I started Disrupt, you know, I was keen to get on, you know, LinkedIn, start posting about work, start talking about stuff, but I had the same thought process that I don't really know anything about this industry. Who am I to start, you know, posting about influencer marketing on LinkedIn or whatever? But again, over time, I did kind of start doing a few posts, and I wouldn't say I've got a personal brand in that space yet, but it's interesting to know that you don't have to know everything from a professional standpoint.
No. And I would argue the fact that you are editing this and you are doing this is an extension of your services to your customer, right? Like, you guys are doing this because you know that people buy from people. So instead of you being like, I now have to be an influencer marketing expert, why don't you just talk about what you're doing as a marketing manager and how that relates back to human marketing? That is influencer. Like, you guys are, by doing this podcast, hopefully going to position yourselves as tastemakers and influencers, which is the desired result, right?
Yeah.
So by you going on that journey and you sharing people that you're going on that journey and you're talking them through the trials and tribulations and how you've had to spend 7 hours cutting out every single fucking arm and arm that you two have said, and do you know what I mean? Like, how many records he nails every time you're like, hang on a second, it takes me 5 days to edit every episode. Like, that's funny, it's relatable, it's interesting, it's going to make me more bought into, you know, your podcast over every other marketing podcast. You know, a great example of this is the Marketing Millennials, right? Marketing Millennials is probably the number one marketing podcast in the world. They have hundreds of thousands of downloads of every episode. Daniel, who's the founder, awesome guy, shout out D, love you lots.
I'm on his newsletter.
Yeah, so he's epic, right? He built that community off the back of his brand. He used to share like memes and just things that only other marketing people would find funny, right?
Yeah.
On his personal brand. People loved it so much, he was like, well, I may as well turn this into a community. So he built a secondary community, which is called the Marketing Millennials, with the podcast attached to it. People didn't originally anyway go to the Marketing Millennials because it was the Marketing Millennials. They went to the Marketing Millennials because it was Daniel sharing insights and also funny memes, like
Relatable,
agency.
yeah.
Exactly. The only other marketing people would find funny. And now it's become much bigger than his brand. And that goes to show that actually you can scale a personal brand into something bigger. So, and that's another kind of objection that a lot of people have is like, okay, I don't know where to start. Great. But what happens if it scales too much? It's like, that's a great problem to have.
To be honest, I don't think one of my fears was that it was I'd be too successful off of building a personal
People
brand.
do have that problem though. They go, oh, what happens if too many people, but what happens if I talk to people too much? That sounds like I need an excuse not to post. Is what that sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
How relentless is it? You know, you just mentioned there, you know, excuse not to post. How relentless do you need to be on social media in order to build your personal brand?
I could sit here and go, it's really easy. You just have to be yourself. It's absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many gurus or however they want to position themselves, experts. I would never call myself an expert ever. Like, other people do, but I don't think that of myself, because I think when you start saying you're an expert at something, it means that you are completely out of touch with like what's happening in the world right now. But there's a lot of experts in personal branding that will say, you know, it's really easy. You just have to like post what you're doing that day and like what was an interesting conversation you had and like what are 5 tips that you would do with this. And it's like, that's great. But like, what happens when you fatigue out?
Yeah.
Like when you don't have anything more to say? The reality is you just have to, like with every other thing, you just have to have a system. And it's really easy to do it once you have a system, but creating the system is the hard bit.
Yeah.
And you know, with your business, right? Like when you're creating systems within the business, the grunt work of getting that going is excruciating. Like trying to force people to do things on certain things and, you know, like building in a new project management tool, bloody hell, that took me like 7 months, like getting people used to that. And we're still not quite there. It's the same with your brand. It's taken me nearly 5 years to get to this point and have built something that actually just ticks. And it does take a lot of, obviously it's going to take you 5 years. It took me 5 years to teach myself. You can now follow me and I will teach you for you. But it does take time. But once you get yourself in that cadence, like going to the gym, you know, you don't want to go, but you go.
Yeah.
Like once you get into that cadence.
Becomes second nature sort of thing.
Yeah, it becomes a habit. So I now know every single day I have to put one piece of content there, one piece of content there, one piece of content there, one piece of content there. But I already have everything planned because I have a system that does it for me. And if you don't know where to start, you just sit down and start just posting stuff for 6 weeks and see what you enjoy talking about and see what your audience resonates with. And then you can build a system after that. I think there's a lot of I don't know where to start objections because people go, oh, I need a strategy. Like you said, I want to post. I know I need to, but I don't know what to say. And will people care about? Well, just post about your favorite football team for 6 months and 6 weeks and see if anyone responds to it. Like you just have to kind of sometimes just go for it.
But I suppose that depends on platform, right? Because if I'm sat there and I'm posting for 6 months on LinkedIn about something totally irrelevant to business.
6 weeks, I said 6 months.
6 weeks, 6 months, about something totally irrelevant, then surely that's not gonna, like, that's not what the platform's for. So then surely there must be strategy based on platform, right?
I think there needs to be strategy based on individual.
Okay.
So, like, to me, a personal brand messaging should always be the same. Like, always. You should have a very clear message about and what I mean by message, it could be that, marketing, it sucks to work in marketing. Sometimes it does. But maybe that's your message, right?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't change that message depending on what platform you would, but you would change the medium in which you delivered it in.
Yeah,
so
the output,
I like to think about social media a little bit like languages, right? So if you want to say hello to anyone, you wouldn't say hello to a French person, you'd say bonjour, I would hope, unless you're...
Salut, maybe.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm not French, clearly. But you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Twitter might be something else. You have to learn the language that each channel
optimizing the
speaks
content.
on.
Yeah.
And then you can optimize your message for that channel, as opposed to going, oh, on TikTok, I need to be really controversial because that's what works there. Or, oh, on Instagram, I need to be really polished because that's what works there. You just need to say the same thing, but in a different way. And I think that's what I would look at, not like I need to say one thing on one thing. And
Okay. That makes
something
complete
else on that.
sense.
And also, it makes your systemization easier.
Yeah.
Because if you know you're only talking about one thing, you can then create loads of subtopics and then loads of subtopics of that and then loads of subtopics of that. So it makes it easier to execute.
One of the messages that's come through so far is that it is something for everyone to consider. And one of the unique things about this podcast, which I love, is you're sitting on a sofa or in the room with an MD and a marketing manager, both doing it. It's not more vital for me as MD compared to Jake as a marketing manager to actually start building that brand themselves, just because I might, from the outside, be considered to have more of an authority in influencer marketing because of my position. But Jake, you're a social media manager. Well, you came in as a social media manager and already know some of the tricks of social already to be able to put that in for yourself and create your own brand.
I also think there's an argument here about, like, you're an MD and you're the marketing manager. It's not enough just for the top of the table to be talking about what the company does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the founder story is more powerful than any ad you'll ever buy, right? Like, that is a fact. Your face is more powerful than your logo, blah, blah, blah. Like, we all know those things. But what's even more powerful is if you're posting stuff online and talking about what the business is doing and the promotions that people are getting internally and the work that you just won and this incredible thing that you just did, and come with me to this podcast and why we're doing the podcast, and oh my God, we said this today and isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
That's great. People will love you. But if they can then go and look at the rest of your company and you're all doing it too,
It's the employee
that
advocacy,
builds
right?
trust. Yeah. Like, you got to look at Gymshark, for example. Gymshark is a great example of a product-led brand, which debunks this entire myth that you have to be a service-led brand to build personal brands, right? Which is a lot of people think. They think people buy from people, therefore we must be selling people for it to be worthwhile doing personal branding. Gymshark has got such an elite culture of personal branding and they sell gym stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it's led from the top. Ben Francis has been absolutely relentless, or rather his team has been relentless on his behalf in building his brand. But you go onto their LinkedIn, you've got like the paid performance marketing intern who's just as a big poster as he is, because they induct people into this culture of like, we need to be talking about the brand. You need to be doing this for your career. You need to see this as an investment in you and not just an investment in the brand, which is really fucking smart because it is an investment in them. And it's great. And they're going to feel wonderful that the company's giving back to them in that way. However, the reach that people have online compared to a company brand is like 600% more.
Really?
So I think it's 561% more.
Okay, wow.
Wait,
And that's a LinkedIn stat alone.
So this, you're saying on LinkedIn, the reach you get from posting personally versus through your brand,
company
your
page,
company page.
561% more. So that's not just let's build a personal brand, guys. That's means bottom line difference by getting every single person in the business to post about the company or about themselves, because people know that they will then come back to the company page. Because LinkedIn particularly, right? I think when people talk about personal branding, they do think of LinkedIn because it's a professional platform, but it's cross-channel.
Sure.
Like it's me doing this as personal branding. Me going and speaking on the stage at the NatWest Business Show last week was personal branding. Like I've got a book coming out in September. That's all offline, but it's personal branding. But LinkedIn particularly has a really niche algorithm in that it ranks members' content above company updates and sponsored ads. So you will very rarely see company updates or an ad in your feed because it doesn't have enough content in the feed made by members to support how much people want it. I think there's some statistic that goes along the lines of like 10 billion impressions made a weekly in the feed by only 3 million users. So that means everyone is wanting to read stuff in the feed, but no one is talking, which means if you're a company selling anything of any kind, which most companies are, you are leaving money on the table by not getting your team to build their personal brands, because you can capture that void, you can fill that space.
Is that also why LinkedIn are taking off timestamps.
They've moved them to the bottom, but
Moved them
yes.
to the bottoms
Yeah, I
because
did
they're
a post
basically
about that
they want
recently.
to
Yeah.
put basically be able to push content that might have gone
Elongate
live
the
like
length
4
of a
weeks ago.
post. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because you used to see things would be like, this was posted 5 weeks ago. You're like, why the fuck is this appearing
Yeah,
on my feed in
yeah,
5
yeah.
weeks? It's because there is a supply and demand problem. There is not enough content in the LinkedIn feed to support how many people are reading it.
Yeah.
So they had to basically take the timestamp, whack it at the bottom so people didn't realize it was old content, and therefore, which is good for creators because you get more longevity in your content, which then in turn makes it seem like creators are getting really big results, which in turn will make my average user go, oh, maybe I should build my personal brand, which then solves LinkedIn's supply and demand problem, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. I wanted to ask you about employee advocacy led personal branding because I think our agency probably isn't the best at is.
Well, you're trying to get more of it out there.
I'm,
right,
you
from
know,
the rest of the team.
I try very hard to encourage the team to post about their successes, post about what they're enjoying at work, post about the brands we're working with. At the moment, we're not doing enough of that, and it's really interesting to know that information about the personal post being valued more than company posts, because you can damn well believe that tomorrow on Slack I'll be saying to the team, right, it's time for everyone to start posting about the agency and about their work because obviously it's valued so much.
But like on top of that as well, so let's just reel off some statistics, which people normally
We
don't
love
do.
a stat.
We love
on
a stat here on Status Update. Yeah, we
People
love a stat.
Goes over their head. But so 561% more reach for a personal brand than a company brand, right?
Yeah.
This brand messages, so shared by you versus the company page, are reshared 24 times more. Wow. They get 8 times more engagement as well. And leads that come through personal brands within a company convert 7 times more frequently than any other channel.
Okay.
So on top of your inbound website inquiries, on top of people calling you up, on top of referrals, stuff that comes to your brand, the stuff that comes through individuals converts 7 times more frequently. So if you're not building your brand, it sounds really fluffy to say you're leaving money on the table, but you're literally leaving money. Like there are people who want to give you money who just don't know about you yet. And they don't know about you yet because they're following people, they're not following company brands. I don't follow any company brands because I'm not interested in company brands. I'm interested in the people behind the company brands.
And as you said earlier, people buy from
People do buy
More
from people.
importantly, though, they buy from people they trust. It's really difficult to build trust if the only people in the organization that are posting are the marketing team from behind the guys with the logo.
You know, while we're on the topic of LinkedIn, I want to get your thoughts on this because for me, LinkedIn has become a kind of a bit of a breeding ground for toxicity.
Isn't that every social media channel?
It is, but I don't think LinkedIn.
But LinkedIn
used
was
to
Come
be
and see
like-
my
Good
TikTok
ones.
comments, dude.
Yeah, but LinkedIn, look, I think you go, especially like as speaking for like Gen Z, you go on there and I'll sign on there at like 8:30 in the morning and I'll be flooded with posts about I've been up since 4:30, I've gone out and I've run 3 marathons and I've had 9 coffees and I've done this much and that much work. And there's been times when I've kind of seen this stuff and I've signed up and been like, I just feel like crap now because I feel like I'm not doing enough. And I feel like, and I feel like a lot of people, they see that stuff and they're like, how am I ever going to succeed if I'm not waking up at 4 and going to bed at 6 p.m. and all this kind of stuff? I mean, what are your thoughts on that level of kind of posting about yourself and bigging yourself up?
Okay, so there's 3 things to this, I think. First and foremost, just because you wake up at 4 a.m. doesn't make you any better than anyone else. Like,
I agree.
It just means that you wake up earlier. You have less sleep. In saying that, though, the reason why I think people post about that kind of stuff is I understand that because I get up really early. Like, I get up early mainly because I've got 2 children. We were talking about it before we started recording. And if I don't wake up early, the first thing I have to do in the morning is to get them ready, which means I'm just then like frantic. So if I wake up earlier, I then have an hour where I can do if I want to meditate, I can do that. If I want to work out, I can do that. If I want to shower, wash my hair, like whatever, I can do that in peace. Generally, my son woke up at 4:58 this morning, so didn't have that luxury.
My son was about half an hour after that, so
Yeah.
also very
I
early.
will just
he was
clarify.
like,
I wasn't talking about you guys, by the way.
He comes in and goes, "Mummy, is it morning time?" And I was like, "Are you fucking joking?" Anyway,
I guess it is now.
it is now. Get in the bed and shut up. So that's why I get up early. And I do think it's made me more successful because I'm more focused. I get more things done. But it's not because it's the waking up early and I'm just better than everyone else. It's because I just have an extra hour in the day to get shit done. And it means that I can do it without being interrupted. So there is something in that. However, social media should be a channel of the distribution of your personality, not the validation of it. So if you're going on there to seek validation or not validation for your activities in your life, you've completely missed the point. You are then at that point a consumer, not a creator. So if you're going on there and going, oh my gosh, like, Ed Milet or whatever is talking about how I need to do this, I need to eat a vegan diet, or I mean, he definitely wouldn't be vegan, but that type of thing. And aren't I worse of a human being because
yeah.
I'm not following him and he's a multimillionaire and I'm just me?
Yeah.
You've missed the point. You need to go on there and go, actually, I don't give a shit whether he's doing that or not. This is what I'm doing for my stuff, and I'm going to therefore share that with the world and see if I can then inspire something in other people. I think there's a real, and I don't necessarily mean you, so don't take this as me
That's
picking you
fine.
out, but there is a sincere lack of accountability that people have when it comes to social media, because they will say things like that. They'll go, oh, you know, I'm really sad because I go on Instagram and all I see is these skinny models, and I'm like, well, fucking change your feed then, dude. Like, if all you're following is skinny models, then all you're going to see is skinny models. How about you stop engaging with that?
Yeah,
and then you
absolutely.
start engaging with like body positivity, or like if you looked at my social media feed, all I have in my social media feed is food. Second thing is like business advice, like lots and lots of like positive stuff. So I follow Happy News on Instagram, and I follow Bloomberg and just stuff like that I find interesting. I think of people who would be classed as like influencers, I maybe follow one, and it's because I like their outfits and I like getting inspiration from their outfits, because I don't want to think about what I have to wear every morning.
Yeah.
But there is not a single part of me that goes, oh, Kylie Jenner, she's really fit, let me follow her, because I know it's going to make me feel like a piece of shit. If you curate the feed that you want to see and that inspires you, you would never have this issue of like logging on and feeling like I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Because you'll log on and go, I'm fucking raring to go. Like I never leave social media being like, I feel less off than when I started on it.
Yeah.
If you think about it in its foundationary, or you know, when it first started, what an incredible thing that you can connect with someone on the opposite side of the world and form a friendship. Like I've made friends with people in Australia, like I'm Australian, but I live in the UK, in Australia, that I never would have met had I not been posting on LinkedIn. One of my best friends I met through posting on LinkedIn. She's like literally my sister now. That would never have happened. But also, we don't know when we innovate what the consequences of these innovations are, right? Like AI, for example, how fucking awesome is it? Like AI, we've got this, as I said, this platform earlier, that's most of it is pumped by AI, and it's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
But we don't know what the consequences of all these things are going to be in the future. Like BBLs, what's the consequences of that going to be like in the future? We don't know. But at the time when it was first created, it was a way of connecting with people. And I think if you re-enter that arena with that in mind, of like, how can I connect with things that are going to make me happy? It's no longer toxic. It's like a really empowering place to be.
I remember, back in the day, 2014 or whatever, like I used to say to people, I love social media. And now, look, we work in it, and maybe some of that love, it's still there for sure, but there's more of that kind of,
media.
there's more, people focus more on the toxic nature of it than
I'm definitely
that
addicted
initial
to
love.
social media. I'm addicted to it. I don't know if I would say I love it. I can't help but look at it. If you,
I love it.
I
But
do
but I wonder whether it's because I view it as work.
Yeah, but so do I.
So, for example, on the way here, like I think most people would be scrolling if they were in a cab or whatever. They'd just be scrolling until they got to their destination. I was on the phone to my friend, because for me, that's like a 20-minute window that I've got that I can just have a conversation with my mate. Social media is 9 to 5 for me. I don't get any joy out of necessarily spending time on it outside of those hours. Like I get inspired by content. Like I spend a lot of time on Twitter looking at content. Like marketing Twitter is great, by the way. It is. I don't spend time until 2:00 in the morning on TikTok, like all these memes make fun of, because to me it doesn't resonate, because that's not my fun.
Yeah.
My fun is watching cooking shows.
I know. I know what you mean. It's like a butcher doesn't go home and make sausages. It's like you don't work on social media all day. I mean, I do.
So maybe you need to
mean.
set boundaries for yourself. Like if you're saying like I spend all that's really toxic. Imagine if you spent all day working in finance and then spent all your fun time trading. You would get no enjoyment out of it. It's like
that's true.
all
That's
time
maybe I do need something.
just get off it in your home time.
So many like actionable points I feel like you've been able to touch on with us, Amelia, which I love. Before we wrap things up, something that we also try and like to ask towards the end is around digital trends that we're seeing over the next 12 months, and good to get your thoughts on anything in particular that you think we should be or keeping an eye out for.
Look, you guys are an influencer, and what I do is very similar, right? Like we build thought leadership for executives and founders, and in many ways they're similar, in many ways they're very not similar. An influencer to me is a paid for billboard, as someone who's built a community and then markets stuff to them. A thought leader is someone who kind of influences people's thought process from within a community. I think they're a little bit different. We have spent the entire, last 24 months, maybe even longer, 4 years, from an influencer and a thought leadership perspective, from every angle, probably you guys also, about how you can leverage TikTok and how you can leverage this and build a community there, and you need a newsletter because then it's going to take. But I genuinely think this year is the year of offline. I think it's the in-person event. It's the build experiences with people.
Okay.
It's the go and network, find ways to actually touch one another in a way that you cannot online. I did the talk that we met at.
Yeah.
I got 3 pieces of business off the back of that, which probably lifetime value is probably $100,000 maybe.
Wow.
I would never have got
can't,
that if I had just done online, because I touched those 3 people in a way, because it was I'm on stage and they can actually feel what I'm saying, that I simply couldn't have done, whether it be on TikTok or LinkedIn. And I do think we're seeing that in click-throughs and all that kind of stuff from paid marketing. Even, you can measure it a lot easier with e-commerce. Unless you have like a real fundamental community foundation, it's really difficult to penetrate markets now. Like, you see all these companies kind of pop up and be disruptive and start, being the kind of it brand of the time, but then fall off really quickly because they have no foundation underneath it. And I think the foundation is people.
Right.
Like, in fact, social media is built on people.
Yeah.
And people need to be social. And social media is not social, right? It's a very transactional thing, whether you're liking a thing or commenting on a thing. It's I do something for you, you do something for me, right?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Whereas in person, like, what I get out of this is a lot of joy and interest in having this conversation with you. Like, this is an in-person interaction now that we just simply wouldn't have been able to have if it was done on Zoom. So
you
the
can't,
trend for 2024 me is in-person
I love that.
experiences.
And I'm a big fan or believer in, you can't build rapport and strong relationships in a half an hour Zoom call.
No, you can't.
Whether you're pitching for new business, whether you're networking at events, whatever it is, in person for me has so much value.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I love that answer. Love that.
That seems like a good
It does.
final point, doesn't it?
It does.
To me? Yeah, that's
Amelia,
great.
that's it's been amazing. Thank you for updating your status with us. I'm walking away
more
with
frames.
that 2024 is getting back offline and that.
I hope so.
And people should be happy if they're sat in traffic now because it means there's more.
I'm just
Yeah,
not going to sign on tomorrow, mate. If that's okay.
As long as you're in the office, that's fine.
Yeah,
Get off WhatsApp and call you down.
exactly.
Amazing. Well, Amelia, as I said, thank you so much. Jake, you're going to do some outro bits for all of this over that, so we can probably cut now. So that's it. A big thanks to you for watching and listening to this podcast. We've got plenty more exciting ones coming your way and a number in our backlog as well for you to go and check out. So make sure you hit follow on your podcast app.
Yep. And as the marketing guy at Disrupt, it's my job to say that you should come and say hi if you think our agency could be helpful to you in any way for you or your brand in the future. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.